In this video, I'm going to show you about shadows and light, and how photographers see both shadows and light in the world. So if I was going to ask you to make a list of things in this room, you'd probably say, oh, there's 17 chairs, there's some desks, there's a bookcase in the back, there's a bulletin board back there, there's an open bookcase here, um, there's a mini whiteboard, but you probably would not notice, oh, there's a shadow here, there's a shadow here, and some shadows on the ground, and light is reflecting off of the wax floor, and those kind of things. We generally, when we think of objects, we think of the actual objects themselves, and we don't think of shadows or beams of light or reflections of light as actual objects. However, in a photograph, shadows can have visual weight. They can become an object and be just as important as any other object. They can give us more information about what's going on. So if we look at the shadow of this spoon, it's giving us information that this spoon in the middle is rounded. And also, if we go over here to these shadows, they have just as much visual weight, and are just as important as the woman here. So these lines are providing repetition and line, and they make the image much more interesting. Light can also have visual weight, not just shadows. So if we can see these beams of light here on the background, or I think there must be some kind of glass vase or something here where the light is going through or being modified right here. It's a very odd, or even this picture, it's a very odd picture of these two here. This is a photo by Gary Winogrand, but having these blazes of light on the wall behind them help lead our eye to their faces. So this light on these walls can be just as important as any other object. So all this light. Shadows can also reference objects that are outside of the frame. So if there was no shadow here, right here, and we saw this hanging down, right here, we saw that little palm tree hanging down. We wouldn't quite be sure what it was, because when you see the shadow, we understand that there's probably a palm tree just outside of the frame. Shadows can also give us more information. And if we look at this image down here, we first see the silver of the darkness right here. This sliver, I'm sorry. But we wouldn't be quite sure what it is. But then seeing this shadow, it's like, oh, that might be a cross. And however, once we see the shadows on the ground, we understand that there's crosses, and perhaps this could be maybe a graveyard. So light can show us texture, so especially directional light, strong light coming from one direction instead of overhead, but rather from the side. So especially directional light, strong light coming from one direction instead of overhead, but rather from one side, can define the edges and folds of textures of objects. If this picture was taken with very even diffuse light from above, we're just going to be like white on white. But with this strong contrast here to light from the side, we see all the wrinkles. And it kind of reminds me of like looking at those beautiful Greek and Roman sculptures that have the very defined folds in the togas and the clothing. Light can define the structure and the architecture of objects. So here we see the edges of these steps. And we see the edges of the steps because of how the light is hitting it. So since the light is casting down on these steps, we're able to actually see them. Light can show detail. So if you look at this picture, what do you think happened like right before this picture was taken? If we look at the street and the texture of the street, we can see that it's wet. And so we can understand that it probably rained right before this picture was taken. Light can also be a focal point, bringing our eyes to a specific part of the photograph first. Because the brightest area and the shaft of light is hitting this boy's face, that's where we look first. And probably we might look down at the flag second, or back up at other people's faces in the picture. But the light here is drawing the attention to that boy's face. Backlighting can be really dramatic. If your source of light is behind your subject, so the light was probably the sun and was placed somewhere down here, then you'll get these really cool like backlit images. So to make a backlit image, make sure that whatever you're turning into a silhouette has an interesting shape. So for instance, a backlit of a rock is going to be pretty boring, you know. But if you have some interesting action or interesting shapes, then a silhouette can be really beautiful. So your assignment is to take 2 photos where light and shadows are the most important thing. I'm going to look at these photos and I really want to look at them and say, wow, that's a photo that really is about light. Or, wow, that's a photo that's really about shadows, where light and shadows are the most interesting thing. Not a photo where there's a little bit of light or a little bit of a shadow in the corner and it's not very noticeable. It should be the most important thing in the photo. Also, please do not use flash for this assignment. The best light source to use is the sun. If you really need to take the pictures from your house at night or someplace that you can take very strong light, even the lampshade of a lamp or one of those work lamps that you might have in your basement or your garage, it's like one of those silver dishes with a bare bulb in it. You might have to see if you have one of those. Just anything that you can light your object with. To make really strong shadows. But those shadows should be of something that are interesting shapes. So again, you don't want a lump. That's just really boring and we don't really know what that is. Like, is it a shadow of a potato? It's, we're not quite sure. But a shadow of like a potted plant that has all the positive and negative space might be really beautiful. So if you have any questions, please let me know. That's what I'm here for.